and we do chat. So I am
And apparently it hasn't wiped you out yet. So,
No, not yet. My house is on stilts, so I should be okay. But I have just jinxed it, of course. Now, my name is George Tarrant, and I am one of the hosts of the Armchair Producers, the legendary podcast where the bare minimum is our standard seal of approval.
You're getting out, nothing more.
Nothing more. Yep. 5 out of 7 Russian bots do approve of this podcast. And we are the number one suburban commando podcast.
The number one in the market.
That's right.
Bar none. I mean, there are no others, but,
Still, we're number one in one. We are equally the best and the worst live podcast for Suburban Commando.
Fans of Suburban Commando. As many of the fans have said to date, it's a nice place to visit, but you wouldn't want to live there. Nice place to live, but you wouldn't want to visit there. And
now that is, of course, the wonderful talent, the man that brings the quality to this show, Mr. Travis Croft. How are you, sir?
I am fine and dandy. It was cool evening. It's in October. It's pretty chilly in Melbourne, pretty wet. I've been literally told to stay away from the office tomorrow. It's going to be raining that much tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
So
don't come in.
Pretty much. It's like my one of my bosses at work today decided to drive in, got halfway and decided to turn around and go back. It was like a car park driving to get into the city today. So
wow.
Bit of wild weather here in Australia. It's probably going to be standard moving forward. So
it seems to be, yeah.
Welcome to the world of tomorrow.
Last week we were talking about the Nullarbor Plains and the dry, arid nature of it, and now we are seriously considering all traveling to work in canoes.
There was a story this week in the news about the drought in Southern California is so severe that the lakes and stuff are drying out completely. And they're finding stuff in them. Like they found a Higgins boat, which is the boat with the door that goes down the front from like Sergeant Saving Private Ryan. They found one of those that was like General Patton's headquarters when he invaded Sicily. It was in a lake in California, and no one's got any idea how it got there. And apparently in Lake Mead in Nevada, they've found like 3 bodies or something. They're just assuming a mob hits, but because Lake Mead is so low, they've become discovered. So it's all happening in different parts of the world. Welcome to the Weather Podcast.
Maybe we'll finally have an answer to the mystery of what happened to Amelia Earhart.
She's shacked up with Elvis and Tupac, I think.
Yes. They are currently being hosted by David Bowie, I believe.
And I believe they are attached to direct the Hollywood remake of Akira. So,
well, it's about time because they've gone through pretty much everyone.
Everyone else.
My letter of offer any day now.
Exactly. It's your turn.
Yeah. Now, we are going to be talking, last week we talked about James and the Giant Peach, which was a very maligned movie in our opinion for many problems, but one of the shining stars of it, one of the true gems, was the wonderful Miriam Margolyes, playing one of the horrible aunts, and we followed her to an uncredited role in Paul Thomas Anderson's 1999 3-hour epic, melancholy epic, I think is a good way of describing this. Magnolia, yes. So Trav, you picked this one. So introduce us to the Magnolia.
An epic mosaic of interrelated characters in search of love, forgiveness, and meaning in the San Fernando Valley. This is Paul Thomas Anderson. His follow-up to Boogie Nights. Miriam Margolyes, as you know, was uncredited, which is surprising because she had a line or two. And I'm like, she wasn't just like someone opening a door somewhere in the background like an extra, but apparently she asked to be uncredited because of the size of the role. 24 Hours in LA. It's raining cats and dogs. 2 parallel intercut stories dramatize men about to die. Both are estranged from grown children. Both want to make contact, and neither child wants anything to do with dad. Earl Partridge's son is a charismatic misogynist. Jimmy Gator's son is a cokehead and a waif. A mild and caring nurse intercedes for Earl, reaching the son. A prayerful and upright beat cop meets the daughter, is attracted to her, and leads her toward a new calm. Meanwhile, guilt consumes Earl's young wife, while two whiz kids, one grown and a loser, and the other young and pressured, face their situations. The weather, too, is quirky. That's a lot, but it's certainly a more accurate read of what the story's about than an epic mosaic of interrelated characters. This movie was, of course, released in 1999, and it reeks of the 90s.
That Amy Mann soundtrack. My goodness.
Amy Mann, heavy Amy Mann soundtrack. She was really the it girl for these sort of things in the late 90s. And there's more 90s once we get under the covers here, too. I remember seeing this, I'm guessing, around about the turn of the century, and really, obviously, but when shortly after it came out, and really quite liking it, and thinking it was a masterpiece. And I think that was kind of the acknowledged, in the zeitgeist at the time, that this was a masterpiece. It has an IMDb score of 8, a Metascore of 77. And what I was interested in was, like, by picking it, was like, does this hold up? Like, I haven't seen this film in 20 plus years. Yeah. And I think we were talking last week. I saw the Family Guy take the piss out of American Beauty. And there's a film from about the same era that I think doesn't hold up at all. And quite aside from the creepiness of Kevin Spacey, what he became, I don't know, it seemed really hip and cool at the time. And now you're just like, really pretentious and wanky. But if you see a film like Fight Club from the late 90s, I think that film is just as relevant now as it was back then. It's still cool and fun and entertaining. Yeah. But I've learned, according to the younger generation, Chuck Palahniuk, don't know how I'm pronouncing his name right, the author of the book Fight Club, is now considered problematic. And you are considered problematic if you read his books. So I was reading a Reddit thread that said, if you went out on a date with someone, and what's a book that if they could tell you was their favorite that would make you turn around and go home? And Chuck Palahniuk was one that was mentioned. Whereas the correct answer, of course, is anything by Ayn Rand. Fucking leave. But so I'm off topic, but like Fight Club, I think is a very relevant and entertaining film still today. This film, I think, falls squarely under the American Beauty banner for me. This was a really hard watch for me this week. It really dragged and sagged along. The storylines are confusing, hard to sort of make sense of sometimes. The musical interlude was bizarre, and the ending was nonsensical. It's kind of hard to put the pieces together to see exactly what it was he was trying to say with his film. Parts of the film make sense. Other parts of it just seem to be ideas that he couldn't get rid of because he liked them too much. What was your initial impression?
I still really like it. Sort of like some of all parts, I still really like it. I still think that it's a really interesting piece. I think it's really a good character piece for many character actors doing things that are slightly different to what they were traditionally known for. I mean, Tom Cruise's Frank T.J. Mackey and his respect the cock and tame the cunt. That was a very ballsy open, especially coming off of the very somber, meek, more quieter, subdued Eyes Wide Shut that he'd done before this.
But it's a risky year for him, though, right? Even the Eyes Wide Shut role was very different to the kind of... He'd come off like the second Mission Impossible film, I think, was the next one that came out after this.
Yes, I think it was. I think
about then,
so it's just 2000. I think.
In between Mission Impossible films, he does a Kubrick film and this. Now that's about as risky as it gets for him. Jerry Maguire, Eyes Wide Shut, Magnolia, Mission Impossible 2. There's a bookend of a couple of films, incredibly risky. I found myself thinking, what a risky year he took in 99. And personally think he should have got Oscar nods for probably one, if not both of them.
Yeah, I agree.
He might have got an Oscar nod for this one.
Apparently, according to IMDb, they pushed John C. Reilly for Best Actor, and everyone else was being pushed for Best Supporting Actor. And he was one that I was just going to call out as well. Up until he kind of hooked up with Will Ferrell, he was doing sort of like more quirky, darker kind of roles generally. This one, he's kind of the most out and out nice guy. And Philip Seymour Hoffman, who, again, he was someone when he started up, he was that odd, weird, quirky guy that was unusual and a bit creepy. He's again kind of playing against character. Julianne Moore didn't really do anything for me in this one. I've never been a huge fan of her work. She sometimes does really great performances, but most of the time it's kind of middling and a bit screamy. And that's what she does here. It's a lot of screaming, and it feels like she's like the embodiment of, or the first to film representation of Karen. Just screaming at everyone and just not actually taking anyone else's opinion into consideration at all. Understandable considering the character's position, but still not exactly entertaining to watch. I agree that it's too fucking long, and Paul Thomas Anderson apparently has gone on record and said, yeah, I would cut quite a bit out of this, which is good because it would need it. Like the storyline of the Gator family, and then the revelation right near the 11th hour of, was he a child molester? That just seemed kind of one toke over the line, far too far. Didn't really need it. They could have just had an estranged relationship, and we didn't actually need that particular extra element there. It was like, okay.
You make a fair point. There are some fantastic performances in here. This is a rare occasion where I think the film is less than the sum of its parts. I think I completely agree with your talk on the acting there. Julianne Moore's role seemed hysterical almost, and I couldn't quite, for a lot of the time, figure out exactly why she was being so hysterical. I mean, aside from the fact her husband was dying, but it didn't really spend a lot of time telling us about that relationship. I feel like William H. Macy's storyline, his arc, honestly could have been cut from this film completely. Yeah. I think there's an actor who was kind of the it guy in the late 90s. He kept popping up in interesting shit. You don't see him very often anymore. Yeah. It's interesting. He has a lot of repeats come back from Boogie Nights. Julianne Moore, William H. Macy, Philip Baker Hall, Philip Seymour Hoffman, all were in Boogie Nights. But it's just a quick thing. He has a crew. He's the kind of guys he likes working with. But he's William H. Macy plays Donnie Smith, the quiz kid Smith, who was a former child quiz champion. And he is now a loser, as it was noted in the synopsis that he is. We see him being fired, turning up late and being fired from his job at an electronics retailer by Doc Ock himself. Yeah,
nice little cameo there.
I was going to say, you've got not even one of the ones I noted was in the cast, but that links us to Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, by the way.
I'm sorry, I already know where we're going, sir.
Not that. But his arc just doesn't really seem to link to the rest of the film a great, other than the soft, as we noted also, that another of the arcs in the film is about a young child who is now on, I assume to be the same quiz show that Donnie made his name on, won his money on. Yeah. And he's a real whiz kid, and we learn that he has a really rough relationship. His dad's like almost one of those cheer moms, but he's a dad. Like, he's really pressuring his kid to win, and he's put all his hopes and dreams into his kid being a champion on this show. And his kid's under incredible pressure and stress to perform on this kid's TV show. And I guess the link is it's hosted by, one of the dying men, Gator. What's his name? I forget his first name, but you just mentioned it. But anyway, but aside from that link between Gator and the young child on the show, Jimmy Gator. Jimmy Gator is the host of the quiz show. But other than that, arc of being under pressure on the quiz show and at one point not being allowed to go to the toilet while the show was filming. I mean, who films a quiz show live? No one. That's who. That was weird, but he pisses himself on the show because they wouldn't let him go to the toilet. And you're like, I don't quite understand how that arc clicks into what everything else is going on in the film. Everything about it was quality, but it doesn't come together as a whole. Versus the other part that confused me were the vignettes at the start of a film. So the urban legends about the scuba diver who gets sucked up by a water bomber and dumped, ends up being found at the top of a pine tree, and the Miriam Margolyes section where she shoots her son, who is in the process of trying to kill himself by jumping off a building. And that whole story angle, but like we spend 5-10 minutes on these two bits, and you're like, how did they click into the rest of the film again?
Part of me feels like I understand why Paul chose to have them in the movie, because they are examples of the random acts that connect us all. And that's what this movie is trying to be. So like a mind map almost of just random moment, how do they connect momentarily, bit here or there, etc. But at the same time, the mild level of absurdity about those opening vignettes kind of made me feel a bit like it was a Roger Avery kind of thing when he was partnered up with that opening kind of feels a little, just a touch of the Pulp Fiction separate narratives all coming together in an unusual way, particularly the Miriam Margolyes one of guy committing suicide and then comically being shot by his own mum as he passes their window going down.
That wasn't really play for laughs, though, was it?
No, but it seems that absurd bit where it would be something that Jules would be talking about as they're driving around LA. And just like, you know what, I heard about this legend of this guy who was trying to commit suicide. You know, it feels like that kind of, it lives in that world. And so then having such a maudlin, sad movie with a lot of very, 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 very sad people, despite of successes or anything else going on in their lives, it felt very disjointed. And it was another example of, like, there were a number of crutches that Paul uses throughout the movie to kind of explain what this movie is trying to express or what is happening with this character. The musical bit, each character is literally saying a line that explains what they're thinking and what they're doing. And it's like, okay, yep, it's kind of cool, artsy, a bit wanky. But if you really need to rely on something like that in your story to keep everyone all on the same page, you're probably juggling with too many balls, or you've just got too much going on, and this is the only way to make it better. So I think this is, whilst there is a lot of genuine brilliance on display here from the actors, from the production, like the single shot takes going through, particularly for young Stanley when he goes to the studio and the camera following him through, and it's just all one shot. Beautiful production, fantastic, great set design, really intelligently done. But it was just kind of like, oh yeah, this is a great idea. This is a great idea. This is a great idea. And no one, apparently, according to the trivia, he had final cut and he could do whatever he wanted.
It's basically after Boogie Nights, the studio said, whatever you want to do next, we'll give you the money and you get final cut for it. He asked for it and he got final cut for it. And I can't blame him for making whatever. I mean, I think he sort of something in here who said, I don't know if we're going to get a chance to do this again. So I'm just going to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks in the end. And I feel like that's what it looks like.
Yeah, I agree.
He kept coming up with good ideas, but they're not full ideas. They're partially formed ideas, or ideas that don't quite click together as a whole.
Yeah. Because overall, I think that he has gone on to create much, much better things.
Oh, absolutely. I think because parts of this that made me remember. It's almost like he's reused parts of this sometimes. I think he reused the relationship between John C. Riley and Malera Warda's character. I forget her character's name. Is it Claudia?
Yeah, Claudia.
That sort of awkward romance between the two of them, because people are saying he's almost a nice guy. I found him creepy as fuck. He's a cop. He's investigating her. He's like basically been called out to a complaint about her loud music, and he's kind of giving in between after giving her a lecture. He's now asking her out on a date. The power imbalance there makes that a super super creepy thing for someone to do. And I was never quite got again. I couldn't quite get what was going on between that dynamic between the two of them. It was like initially I thought she's just saying yes to get him out of the house because she's a cokehead and she doesn't want to. Cokehead wants a cop hanging around, but in the end, she seems quite glad to go on a date and seems to actually like him. But I don't know if that quite ever stuck that landing to go. This is what we're doing with this couple, right? Everything says the synopsis here says it calms her. I'm like, well, maybe, but that seems like a leap to me. But maybe that's what someone else got out of it. What I thought though was that it reminded me a little bit of Punch Drunk Love.
Yes,
and the relationship between Adam Sandler is it Emily Watson? I can't think of it. In that film, so to this really awkward, weird, dysfunctional guy and Adam Sandler's character, and a less quirky but still kind of quirky woman in Emily Watson, being I don't know, was she a manic pixie dream girl? And that you decide. But that sort of couple, that kind of pairing, really seemed to just click in that film, and that love story was amazing in that film. The only Adam Sandler film I like, and the Adam Sandler film Adam Sandler fans don't like.
I think that's a very good point. And looking at something like Punch Drunk Love, there's elements of it that are more bizarre and more comic, but at the same time, the people aren't necessarily the source of the comedy of it. Adam Sandler's character is really quite lovely. He's got issues, but he's really just trying his best to get through. There's whereas with John C. Riley, you're right, that power dynamic, there is the thing where she says, oh, is it illegal? And he says, yeah, kind of. It's like, yep. That kind of takes it somewhat, doesn't it? And it just seems bizarre. And her, Claudia, being just constantly twitchy, nervous, and like, I don't know whether it is good, her performance of a cokehead, because it's supposed to suggest that he's actually not a good cop beyond him losing his gun and crying about it. But if I was on that date with someone being as twitchy as that, my first thought would be, are you on drugs? And I don't know if that's intentional, that he's just supposed to be supremely naive, but they don't explain that. Whereas the kind of man-child element of Adam Sandler's character in Punch Drunk Love, they never genuinely try to explain it. And it just fits in the world, in the relationships, and particularly with Emily Watson's relationship with him. Much, much better, more organic, more wholesome as well.
It had a similar vibe, at least. The way I can describe it, it made me think about that conversation between the two of them, reminding me of a vibe between those characters in Punch Drunk Love. And I kind of thought to myself, has he just gone, I like some of what I did here, but I think I can do it better.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the example of there's a lot of good ideas in here and a lot of great performances. You called out Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise did get nominated for Best Supporting Actor for this film. However, he lost out to Michael Caine for Side of House Rules. I haven't seen it, so it must be very good because fuck Tom Cruise's goodness. And whenever people tell me Tom Cruise can't act or he's not a good actor, I'm like, the guy is a serious actor, but I just don't think he chooses to use that very often. I think he's been. Why should you? He gets paid what $20 million a movie or something crazy to go off and do. I guess the kind of films he enjoys doing are films like Top Gun, Mission Impossible.
And to be fair, I mean, the criticism of when he did this, when he did Eyes Wide Shut, things like that, it was about his celebrity rather than his ability. So it's like, okay, well, if people aren't even going to, before the film is even out, people are going to judge me and say, oh, it's a Tom Cruise vehicle. Why the fuck should I bother? If that's what people are going to think, I'm going to fucking do that, and I'm going to do it my goddamn way, and I'm going to learn how to fly a jet for this movie.
Look, I literally read that he could be the first civilian to take a spacewalk in the next movie he's going to make with Doug Liman. Like, that's nuts.
Yeah.
But I know you and I both know people who won't see movies because he's in it.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not a fan of his religion.
Nope.
By any stretch of imagination. But you know what? Like, he makes some decent movies at the same time. He doesn't go around murdering people. I mean, he's not a creep. Like, he's not on trial for touching young children like certain other Academy Award winners, like who I mentioned earlier. He jumped on the couch and acted a bit pretty weird a few years ago.
Yeah,
like, I get it. The guy's a weird fucking guy. Probably, I'm not sure. I don't want to hang out with him. That said, if he wants to come on the show for an interview, I will allow it.
Yeah. You would just sit there and just, I'm quietly judging you.
I would be happy with that. But I don't understand. Oh, I won't see a movie because he's weird. I'm like, anyway. Okay. This is an example of this. Eyes Wide Shut, he was fantastic in, and I think the other highlight of his career for me personally is Tropic Thunder. And there's now talk again of that
Grossman
film coming up, which I find a strange idea. I thought it was based on Harvey Weinstein, and I don't know how tasteful it is now to make a movie where your character's based on him. But if anyone can do it, Cruise can, I guess. Like,
I guess so.
He's got the juice to get that made. But he's fantastic in that movie.
Yeah,
hilarious and vulgar, and when he plays against type, the guy can seriously act. Sorry, I want to go on to it. He is so good in this film, and the actual character is written so well that, like, this is 23 years ago, this came out. He predicted this is the kind of shit you see all over the shop today. This kind of today he might be called an incel.
Yeah.
Or a pickup artist. And I assure that's not exclusively a 21st century phenomenon, but it's become a thing in the last few years, right? There's kind of people, teaching men how to be super fucking creepy like this, Yeah. Today he'd be a Proud Boy. He'd be wearing a MAGA hat or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
I just thought it was fascinating to see him play a character like that. Kind of ahead of his time in a way. That kind of you mentioned Philip Seymour Hoffman. This made my heart hurt because fuck, he was an actor. He was an amazing actor.
I miss his talent. He was so good in everything that he did. He just every time he disappeared into his roles.
And people, it's so easy to forget that this is very early in his career. When you see what he did again, go back to Punch Drunk Love. He was so good in Punch Drunk Love as well as the Mattress Man. And I'm with you. Kind of like the only performance in here that didn't really work for me, I think, was probably again sort of Julianne Moore. Melora Waters. I guess that's what a cokehead's like. I don't know. Yeah. What did you make of the frogs, though?
It was again. It's supposed to be that unifying, absurd, random act of God, whatever you want to call it, moment that unites all of the characters. But it still didn't. Even it could have been that one thing that really pulled young Stanley's story into it. He could have been maybe on his way home, And walking down the street, that's when he maybe sees young Donnie trying to scale, and then the three of them take shelter and just have this conversation, so that they bring them all together. But they didn't. He was still just perfectly comfortable in the library, just watching it, and it's again production-wise looked awesome. They did really well with it, mixing in so many dummies and the slime and everything, and the sound was just
it looked good,
and the fact that they got real toads and frogs in there just so that they still had that genuine movement in there. It looked great, but in the story it's like, I think I understand why you chose to do this, but it doesn't really do anything.
I just found it. I mean, I remembered it when it happened. Oh, that's right. There's a frog thing in this. And I'm like,
yeah.
I was 20 years later. I still don't understand what the fuck you're trying to say about this.
You kiss enough frogs and you'll find a prince.
Just to mention how 90s this film gets. Most of the paintings in the film, and there are paintings of magnolia flowers in many of the shots in this film.
Yeah,
were done apparently by Fiona Apple. The missed call, where Philip Seymour Hoffman accidentally calls a pharmacy instead of Frank Mackey, the voice on the phone is Fiona Apple. And the story about the young kid not being able to go to the toilet whilst filming a TV show was apparently based on the story that Fiona Apple told the director. Now, nothing more. We thought this one was 90s enough with the interstare, different character arcs, sometimes interacting and sometimes not. And Amy Mann songs, them singing along to them in the movie. Fiona Apple as a major, contributor, creative contributor to the film. It doesn't get more 90s than that. If you don't know who Fiona Apple is, do check her out. Some of her early music was very good. But it's not a name you hear anymore, but she was hot in the late 90s.
Yep.
I have had a little bit bad. I'm glad you didn't absolutely abhor watching this. Like, I was like, oh my God. It's just 3 hours and it's a lot. It's a lot of film and a lot to take in. I'm glad you didn't hate it.
No, I still respect it. I think on a do I or don't I scale, I do still like this movie, but it is not as good as I remember it. And part of that is, in 2000, I was really determined to get into movies and things like that. So I was being hyper analytical and hyper aware of, oh yes, this is the popular movie, so I've got to make sure that I like it. And yeah, it's good. It's got a lot of really good things in it. It's got a lot of good redeeming qualities, but fuck, 3 hours is a long time to look at to finger through someone's sketchbook of potential ideas for the future.
It was a lot to stand up against the crowd and go, the guy who made Boogie Nights, his new movie's not that great actually. You needed a pair to be able to stand up and say that. Everybody was wetting their pants about Magnolia.
Yeah.
But maybe it's also, the intersecting storyline thing. It was kind of, Pulp Fiction, think Go. It was just kind of the done thing at the time, the hip thing. And I think it's kind of played out now all these years later. You don't see it done much anymore.
No, you really, really don't. It's definitely one of the kind of forgotten or very rarely used tropes of Hollywood anymore. You still do get it from time to time, but I'm glad it's left to the side, so to speak.
Anyhow, if you have nothing else to say, you have the keys.
I do not. And we are going to follow William H. Macy. And we are going to go to... I just need to pull it up just to make sure I'm getting all the information right. It's another 1999 movie. And this is a lost gem, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mystery Men.
I've almost gone to Mystery Men a few times. This is arguably the best superhero film of the 90s.
Yes, it is. Directed by Kinka Usha, who has done nothing since.
I think he literally said, I don't want to do another film ever again.
Yeah. He's just not done anything, which is a shame because this movie is just bizarre and weird and just wholly unusual and kind of ahead of its time, but also of its time. It has got one hell of a cast to it. Ben Stiller, Gianni Garofalo, William H. Macy, Hank Azaria, Kel Mitchell, Paul Rubens, Greg Kinnear, Jeffrey Rush, Eddie Izzard, Tom Waits. It's got everything you possibly want. A group of inept amateur superheroes must try to save the day when a supervillain threatens to destroy a major superhero and the city. This is one of my most enjoyable things. I mean, Jeffrey Rush is Casanova Frankenstein. He's great.
And I think perhaps the funniest scene in superhero film history is the toggle flip scene. So I haven't seen this in a long time, but this film is I'm looking forward to this. It's worth seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And then not just because of the All-Star, not because of the Smash Mouth song.
Oh God, no. But for anyone who wants to play along at home, this is available to rent on YouTube, on Fetch, on Apple TV, and Amazon. And you can buy it on all of those platforms as well. It is a mere $5 if you want to pay top dollar, but $4 on YouTube. This is a great little film. I'm really hoping. Actually, it's got another link to it as well. Ricky Jay.
Oh, I don't remember. Which character was he?
He was the narrator.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So there you go. It is a firm mystery man of 1999. We are sticking in the late 90s, ladies and gentlemen.
What an odd film! Like you'd almost expect a film like this to come out today because the piss out of superhero film, but there weren't that many being made back then. So
no, there weren't. And to kind of just go, oh yeah, you know what? We're gonna make a superhero movie about really shit superheroes. Ben Stiller plays Furious, who gets really strong when really angry, and throughout pretty much the whole movie, does he actually have a superpower?
And it's based on an actual comic book, I think. So
yes, with the flaming carrot.
It was unfortunately overlooked at the time, but hopefully you get to come along and watch with us next week.
Yes. Oh, so excited for this one. There were so many delightful possibilities to go from Magnolia because of that all-star cast. I was tempted to follow Philip Seymour Hoffman to The Master because I've not had a chance to watch that.
Or you're going to follow the director to that as well.
Exactly. Yes. But I decided, nope. 3 hours of melancholy. Let's go for something fun. Let's have how it ends up. Yeah. Now, where should we go to next, sir?
What have you been watching this week?
Well, shall I just do non-spoilery conversation about the Rings of Power?
By all means.
Okay. So, actually, you know what? I'm not going to. Considering we recorded late, there's not anything new to put up. It will be next week that I'll put the season finale for Rings of Power. But all I'll say is I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. So instead of Rings of Power, I'm going to talk about an Apple TV original movie animated by one of the Me Too movement producers. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. I'm talking about John Lasseter producing Luck. Now, this is an interesting one, considering John Lasseter and his heavy fall from grace of his time at Pixar, being much praised for many, 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 many years for his abilities as a director and as a producer, and for being such a seemingly positive voice in cinema. To be heavily Me Too'd. And now he's one of the heads of Skydance Entertainment, caused Emma Thompson was supposed to be a voice in one of the movies that was being produced by them. She refused to work there because of John Lasseter. Fair enough. Respect that. Always respect Emma Thompson. She'll fuck you up. But luck is the curtain being pulled back on the millennia-old battle between the organizations of good luck and bad luck that secretly affect everyday lives. That makes it sound far more interesting than it actually is. Because it doesn't go into the millennia-old battle between good and bad luck. No, not at all. This follows. Let's see if I can get this right here, ladies and gentlemen. Sam, voiced by Eva Noblezada, as she is introduced to us as an extremely unlucky young lady who has aged out of the sort of like adoption home that she stays at. She never got adopted. She was too unlucky for that sort of thing. But she's been working. She's shown maturity. And we see as she is introduced into the real world to live on her own, self-sufficient, yada, yada, yada. And then one day she meets Bob the cat, voiced by Simon Pegg, bringing his quintessential voice work to this, and he gives her accidentally a lucky coin, which completely changes her life. But she loses it in comical environment, and she tracks him down and accidentally follows him to the land of luck. And then they have to work together to try and get her back to the real world and find this lost coin. Hijinks ensue. That's the story, and the animation is solid. It's fine. It looks pretty good. The voice work is generally okay. It's inoffensive comparative to other, especially early 2000s, where everyone was making animated movies and just getting as many famous names as they could to just voice them, thinking, yeah, that'll do. There is a little bit of that to this. There is a little bit of heart to it. The relationship that Sam has with one of the younger girls, I think it's Hazel, maybe, who is hoping to get adopted in the coming weekend, and that's why she's trying to get this lucky coin back so that she can give her the good luck. But it's very, very obvious what's going to happen throughout the whole movie, and there are no surprises. There's no real tension being built. It's fine if you are already signed up to Apple TV because it is free, and it will be a perfectly cromulent movie to watch if you have got kids under the age of 10. Otherwise, there are better movies out there that are going to stimulate, excite, and engage yourself and your children in far better ways than Luck does. And that's what happens on that.
It's got some talent behind it. The writers, the story writers have worked on things like the Kung Fu Panda films, King of the Hill. The screenwriter worked on films like Raya the Last Dragon and Cars. So there's some quality there. There's some quality work, but it sounds like maybe wondering if maybe the John Lasseter involved scares away some of the talent who might have been involved, aside from Emma Thompson.
Maybe. I don't know if it was this movie that Emma Thompson was going to be in, just to clarify, but that was definitely a story out there. Yeah, I don't know, because there is a lot of talent on display and behind the scenes for this. But
just for example, the director is done sweet fuck all.
Yeah, and it kind of feels like they've probably been shadow directed, because there's a lot going on in this that you kind of look at it and go, oh yeah, I see John Lasseter's fingerprint on this. And for better or worse, that gets the movie over the line. I think that the quality of the animation and the talent that has been pulled overall is good. If they can if John Lasseter is able to fucking control himself and be a decent human being, for one thing, and build this team up, and whatever they produce next for their animated movie is better, more solid in every regard, could very well see the birth of a new studio to rival the current standards, Disney, Pixar, DreamWorks, even Illumination. But that stink of John Lasseter is pungent and makes it hard for people to want to work with him.
Makes it hard to want to watch it.
Yeah. I mean, I just watched it because it was free. Honestly, there was no other reason. I had no incentive. Simon Pegg, whilst being an incredibly charming man and talented in many ways, he's not a voice actor. So it's like, all right, you're Simon Pegg as a cat. You're not really bringing anything else to this. Whatever. Even the emotional story behind Bob's character, it's incomplete, and it could actually have been a really, really interesting driving story for his character, but they just don't really do anything with it, which is kind of the review of the whole film. There's some really interesting potential and ideas in this movie, but much like Magnolia, they either focus on the wrong ones or they just incomplete them and just go, that's fine, sparkles. So yeah, just a short review on that one, but it's just one that I watched recently. So there you go.
I didn't even know it was out, so that's good to hear.
Yeah.
I will steal it.
Because,
I don't want to pay for another streaming service, and John Lasseter can get fucked.
Yes. What about you, sir? What have you watched? What do you want to talk about first?
I think it's busy. Should we really cram some stuff in? Coming up to our commercial break, apologies, we don't have a Trek perspective this week. Hoping we'll have it in the can for next week with all three of the Abrams-verse films to talk about. So that's coming up in a sec. But
it is taking a while, ladies and gentlemen, because it's really weird. Michelle has got demands, and
she's got a life.
She wants
she has studies to do.
Things.
It's that hardly. Funny enough, it's hard to find time to watch films she genuinely hates. I mean, who'd have thunk it? I think it's fair to say I don't think she's going to willingly watch Star Trek 14 when and if it ever comes out. So this will be a lot.
If Tarantino ends up doing anything with Star Trek, that could be enough of a
I don't think so. I don't think
really?
anything. I don't know if there's anything that can make it happen. So she's been a fantastic sport, and we will have a retrospective hopefully next week for you for the last time.
Yes. And we're working on be able to debut our next available T-shirt.
We have some ideas about what might follow up with retrospective, but nothing confirmed. But it's been such a pop, along with Suburban Commando. Yeah, I keep saying it. Hopefully, it will be anyway, I would like to talk quickly about Emily the Criminal, which is a film I caught weekend past. It's didn't get a chance to see. It was the Melbourne International Film Festival. The did show there. This film is an indie thriller, starring probably most notably Aubrey Plaza. Probably best known for in Parks and Rec. She was also in a film called Safety Not Guaranteed, which is another indie film from a few years ago.
Great film, yeah.
Which is a really great film if you haven't seen it. Mm-hmm. That's from 10 years ago. How is that 10 years ago now? Jesus
Time
Christ.
travel.
And the other name you'll probably notice if you look at the names, Gina Gershon, who the It Girl of the 90s. There's also Theo Rossi, who is instantly. Oh, I know that guy. He was in Sons of Anarchy.
He was also in Luke Cage on Netflix.
Yes. That was a long time ago now. Directed by John Patton Ford, who I am not familiar with. I think he's a very young director. I think this might be one of his first features. It might be his first feature, actually. Keep
Yeah,
an eye on him. Anyway, down on her luck and saddled with debt, Emily gets involved in a credit card scam that pulls into the criminal underworld of Los Angeles, ultimately leading to deadly consequences. So this is a really different sort of a role for Aubrey Plaza, who I think is probably best known for light sort of romantic comedies or just comedy, period. There's no
her
comedy.
deadpan comedy delivery is kind of second to none.
It's brilliant, and I think she's fantastic, and I really enjoyed her work doing that. But this is way left field for her. She plays as a underemployed young artist who works for a catering company in Los Angeles. And we find out early on she's saddled with about $70,000 of student debt, which she's barely servicing the interest of working this job, delivering food to offices and stuff like that. It's a fairly thankless job, which she obviously isn't getting much out of. She has friends who work more high profile, sort of corporate creative jobs, the kind of jobs that she wants, and they aren't much help in getting her a job or work with them. We open up to her being attending a job interview where during a background check, the potential employer finds out she has a felony conviction for assault, which she hasn't disclosed, and it's all really nicely pieced together to sort of build this portrait of a character who is kind of stuck in the underclass, if you will. So she's talented, she's intelligent, she's capable, she's hardworking, but she's being held down by these more mistakes and actions she's taken in the past, being, a felony conviction for assault and, all this mountain of debt. And if you aren't from the United States, student debt's no laughing matter in that country. You cannot get under it. It's like proper bank loan kind of thing, not like Australia. I don't know. A university, you have to pay for university in the UK?
Yeah.
You have to pay. Does the government loan you the money? Is that how it works?
Sometimes, if you're rich.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You can get them, but you do have to pay it back still.
Same in Australia, you have to pay the money back, but the government isn't quite a bank. You're not paying bank interest on it, despite the fact that, they're doing their very best to make it look like the United States in this country. So she's held down, really, this character, and she's really, despite her hustle, has not really any opportunity to get out from under that, and it really starts to build the idea about this is how someone, has a lifetime where they kind of, don't move off that sort of hand-to-mouth living standard. A friend of hers at work puts her onto a phone number, which she calls out of desperation. And it turns out this is the phone number of Yusuf, played by Theo Rossi, who is running a credit card fraud ring. Basically, he has all these underprivileged is maybe the wrong word, poor people turn up. He gives them a cloned credit card. They're told to go to a store to buy a big screen TV, and then they hand in the car park. They hand the TV, if the card works, over to Yusuf, and they get paid $200 for their trouble.
Okay.
So the speech at the start is a fantastic speech he gives them before sending them out. You're going to be asked to go out now and commit something, do something illegal. You're not going to endanger yourself or anyone else, but it is illegal. If anyone wants to leave, you can go now. And she pulls it off and likes the money. You can tell she kind of likes Yusuf as well. So she decides to escalate and try again. And then it sort of starts to spiral, as it sort of says, from there on in. So you start pulled into that criminal underworld where it's almost you can almost, what the sort of director does really nice is you can almost see how seamlessly it works. That 1 minute you're doing something that might be seen by some as a victimless crime, the credit card fraud, which is basically defrauding Walmart and Visa card. So who do you barrack for in that one? Before long, you can almost get the seamless nature of her sliding very easily into significantly more serious and dangerous crimes. And it's what I like about this is that sounds like a pretty cliched storyline. We've seen that before.
Yeah.
Is the nature of a character herself. She's so well written and such an interesting character. That, as I sort of said, she's all these things we want people to be: intelligent, hardworking. She hustles. She's creative. She's got all these personal attributes that someone would need to succeed, and what we're told you need to succeed in society. But she has no chance. That door has pretty much closed. And for someone, it's almost the old, the boomers climbed up and then pulled up the ladder behind them kind of vibe. And you kind of start to really feel for the character of what option does she have but for, committing crime or breaking out of that, that box that here's the legal box of society, but she's bashing her head against the top and there's no way out. Then, sometimes people you can see why they would take that risk and try things that are, outside the law as being one of a few ways to sort of break out of, that rut that they're in. The character is beautifully written. The acting's sensational. She makes some choices you just don't expect when the film. People who watch the show regularly. I love it when a film zigs when I expect it to zag. If this film does that, it really portrays this character as someone who's not going to lie down and take things. It's a fantastic scene where she makes a foolish choice and meets somebody at her own home who's buying stolen goods from her, and just the scene that develops from that is eye-opening and incredibly cathartic. This is a wonderful, wonderful little film. So
where did you see this?
I'd rather you didn't ask me that question. No, I
at a drive-through, right?
I actually paid to see this at MIF, but I couldn't go.
You paid for your ticket and you went to drive.
Okay, look, I downloaded a copy, but it is showing at the Astor in Melbourne occasionally. I think it you'll find it in your art house cinemas around the place. It is, a newish release. I think it's streaming in the US somewhere. I don't know.
Currently not available on streaming services in Australia, but
keep an eye out for it.
We can.
Yes. Look, just keep an eye out for it. If you're the kind of person who doesn't, if you're so inclined, you can be found. As I said, it was playing at the Astor here in Melbourne a little while ago. I think it's playing at some of the rooftop cinemas here in Melbourne as well. So just keep your eye to the ground. I'm sure it will pop up available somewhere, or maybe on one of the streaming services to rent. It's a sensational little film. Really, it's really stuck with me since I saw it.
Fantastic. Great stuff. Okay. You think it's time for a sponsor?
I think it's time for our sponsors break. And I've got a special treat for you this week.
Oh, no. It's always so good and bad at the same time when you say that.
Oh, it is good. This one's a good one. So let's just get that queued up for you.
Where are we going? Introduce our sponsors. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, you can use #NoDiscount at checkout for all of us.
This week's sponsor is the Long Melford Football Club and their highlights over the last 12 months. So
this is football from my hometown. I love how serious they all are when there's like 12 people in attendance.
Did it bring back some memories?
No, because I never saw them live. But I did walk across that field.
Shocked. I know people will be very, very curious, but that was Long Melford 2, Lake and Eve 3. They lost that game. Sorry, guys.
Ooh, a traditional Long Melford loss there, ladies and gentlemen.
It was either that or Long Melford Cricket Club, and those streams go for about 7 hours.
Yeah, because nothing. This is for all cricket, not just Long Melford cricket, but nothing happens. There is one person, a very important person, in attendance for every cricket match, where he's got a random timer, and it randomly just goes off, and then someone, when that timer goes off, goes "How's that?" and everyone drinks beer. That's cricket.
That's why we love it.
No, it's not.
Seriously, you're going to have to come to a 2020 game with me, because that is just simply not true of that game. It's much more fast-paced.
Okay.
And there's a lot less police.
Okay. You organize that, and I will be there.
Very well. You, me, Geelong, Cardinia Park. The 2020 World Cup is on in the next month or so. Actually, I believe.
Oh, really busy at work,
And so Sunday, October the 16th, so this Sunday, Cardinia Park, Sri Lanka versus Namibia, Battle of the Titans. No, sorry, I don't really.
Where was that? November 16th?
No, I don't think we can make it. It's actually this Sunday, but
no, I will not be here. I will be away.
I was making a joke. It says you have some Namibia versus Sri Lanka. Does not sound like a particularly entertaining evening out. So anyway,
I don't know. I mean, it's all Russian to me.
It's a country, so right?
Yes.
Anyway, so that was Long Melford Soccer Club. That's where his hometown soccer club for a while. I think we used to take bets on Long Melford Soccer Club on the G&T podcast, the original challenge mode that led to some very amusing outcomes.
Yes. I kind of feel like we need to bring challenge mode back in some way.
Maybe we can. We'll have a think about that. See if we can come up with who could forget the Wheel of Heigl?
That is actually, I know that still exists in the third layer of hell.
Indeed. And that's where Catherine Heigl's career resides these days, I'm told.
Yes, I believe so. Now, enough trash talk, also known as English football. I want to talk about another Netflix animated series, limited series that has just recently come out. I'm talking about one of our favorite topics, video game adaptations. And again, Tekken being adapted. Tekken Bloodline.
It's a fighting game.
Yes, it is a fighting game. This follows the story of young Jin Kazama and his fight to become one of the best fighters in the King of Iron Fist tournament. This is your quintessential beat-em-up story, just translated to anime / I don't think it was actually produced by a Japanese animation house. This feels very much like, what would they do? But we don't actually want to send it to Japan, and we want to have it on a budget kind of feel. I'm going to just quickly check now. Oh, apparently it was Japanese. Okay. Studio Hibari and Larks Entertainment. Okay, it was licensed by Netflix. All right. It's an interesting one.
Are you a Tekken fan?
No, not really. Beat 'em ups, I enjoy. Button bashing. I remember I think it was Tekken. One of the Tekkens, they brought Eddie in, and he's like a capoeira Brazilian dance fighter, and he was great for just button bashing because every move just flowed one to the other, and you could just spam things and it would look cool. And unless you went against someone who knew what they were doing, you'd probably win. I know sort of like a supporter and fan of the show, Siren Divine, is a massive Tekken nerd, as well as one or two of the customers at the shop. We've had discussions about Bloodline. The fight sequences are kind of cool, and the story is overall interesting, then gets to the point of absurd because there's a legitimate demon. And I kind of feel like they went a little bit too far with that by the end of the show, because it was an interesting, compelling story of young Jin being trained in martial arts by his mother. And then this ogre character comes and just decimates her, kills her, and he has to go and live. He has to go and find his grandfather, who is Heihachi Mishima. And he learns a new style of fighting, which is far more brutal and violent and aggressive. And the idea is to train this Jin Kazama up so that he is the best fighter to lure out Ogre, who is an entity that apparently is only drawn to the most powerful fighters. And so this King of the Iron Fist tournament that is being run by Heihachi is designed supposedly as a trap to capture him so that Heihachi can claim it in some way. I don't quite know. It gets a little muddy. And the kind of development that they have going on is kind of cool. But then when you get to the tournament, suddenly it goes into beast mode super quick, go through everything, kind of forget about developing all these characters. And that's really to the detriment of the show, because there's a lot of interesting things that are going on there, but they don't actually spend any time with it. I think it's like 9 episodes or 6 episodes, even shorter. And they really should have had this as 9 episodes or 10 or 13. This is Netflix. This is what we say about Disney. They can have them each episode as long as they want and a season as long as they want. I hope that there is a series following on from this, because the world that they created is overall interesting. And if you rein in some of the supernatural element and just really invest in the characters of this, you could get some really interesting stuff going on. Particularly the character of King, or King 2, as it turns out, is like an interesting story of why they're there. And it's like a throwaway line. And wait, what was that tidbit? Oh, okay. You want me to look at the fighty boom stuff again? Okay, cool. Sure. All right. Overall, the animation is pretty good. It's done very well, but it does feel a little bit on a budget, especially compared to the more recent Cyberpunk Edge Runners, which just had oodles of style and quality animation on display. It was really phenomenally done, as well as so many of the other animated things that we've talked about in the past for Netflix. Most recently was the Sandman bonus episode with the cats. Fantastic animation. And the forthcoming Pinocchio by Guillermo del Toro looks amazing for stop motion. So it's a little disappointing to see somewhat lackluster animation coming there, but still, it's serviceable. The voice work is overall pretty good. They don't use any major voice talents in it, to the point where I'm looking at the list and I don't recognize any of the ones that are on the primary list for the cast. Let me just have a quick look in case there's anything on the translations. Bill Butts. Yeah, there's no one that I recognize their voice work of. But like I say, they generally do a good job. They just kind of went too far into the video games too soon. I think they could have brought in this more supernatural element later on, but there was enough of a rich family drama to tell here to get them through the first season and just introduce this world and introduce a few of the characters rather than do what is traditionally done of throw all of those characters at the movie at once and people will like it, right? Nah, we expect a little bit more from adaptations and translations now.
Worth a look. I mean, so that's generally kind of a thumbs up.
Yeah, I'd say on a scale of 2, this is this.
One and a bit.
One and a fist bump.
I'd be curious if anybody's watched the TV show. Sorry, not watched it. Sorry, played the video game. Who's a huge fan. Like, is this based on lore from the games, or are we just?
Well, according to my friend Andrew at work, he was really impressed with the development of Ogre. The hang up that I have with it somewhat, because he develops into a character called True Ogre, and he was really pleased with how that was represented and the fact that they actually embrace that in the show. So maybe this is a show for big fans of. I will reach out to Siren Divine and see what her thought is on it if she's watched it. But I thought it could have, if they did want to go there, and that's what big fans would have liked, I feel like they could have just kept it with the Mishima family story to start with and brought that in at a later date. But again, we're in a point where we're getting kind of confusing messages about what Netflix are doing about animation, whether they're going to keep going with it, where they've seen quite a lot of overall success, or if they're going to drop it because it's just too costly for them. Who knows?
It said this was contracted, so licensed to them. So
yeah,
this isn't a Netflix animation. It's just something they've bought.
Yeah. So it's an interesting one. Like I say, some good stuff overall. I think I would maybe recommend this more than I would Luck, but it's definitely more unlike Luck, which is angled at blunderbuss shot of we'll get whoever we can get. Tekken is a little bit more niche, so if you don't like it within the first 15 minutes, you will not like the rest of the series. They do generally hit their mark and stick with it on a typical trajectory. So yeah,
I'd like to talk about a Netflix film now, or a Netflix exclusive, if you will. I know this film was made for Netflix, but it's only on Netflix. And that is Luckiest Girl Alive.
Luckiest Girl Alive.
So this stars, well, most notably, Mila Kunis. The only other name I think I even noticed in there is Scoot McNairy. He of Argo, Superman, Batman vs Superman, Dawn of Justice, and one of my favorite shows, Halt and Catch Fire. He pops up in some interesting places. This is directed by Mike Barker, based on the novel by Jessica Knoll, who also wrote the screenplay. Mike Barker, probably best known for things. He's directed some episodes of Handmaid's Tale, Fargo, Broadchurch, Outlander, that kind of thing.
Okay.
The plot line: a woman in New York who seems to have things under control is faced with a trauma that makes her life unravel. So Mila Kunis plays the character of Arnie Finelli, Arnie short for Tiffany. And she is currently engaged to Luke Harrison, played by Thin Witchrock. And if there's anybody in the universe who looks like they should have been named Thin Witchrock, it's this bloke.
I think he's in a lot of the American Horror Story things. Yeah.
I haven't watched. I watched part of the first season and never again. Hence, I didn't recognize him. Sorry, the other Nate facing he was Connie Britton. He plays Arnie's mother, who you'll probably recognize her face from stuff.
American Horror Story again.
Nashville, that kind of thing. So Luke Harrison, her fiance, is from old money. He went to a prominent college. He was a lacrosse player. He's a huge, hunky, good-looking, successful, rich guy from a good-looking, successful, rich family. Tiffany is from less auspicious stock, if you shall say. And she sort of worked her way up to be an executive editor at a women's magazine of some kind, like writing stories. Sorry,
she
plucky young journalist. One might say all of that, but significantly more successful than Meg Ryan. And she writes stories that she does not very proud of about, 10 ways to give a great blowjob kind of thing. But she really wants to work a more prestigious job. She's hanging around to her boss has promised her to take her to New York Times Magazine when she takes a job there.
Okay.
And as it starts out, it just kind of seems like yet another rich girl in the big city kind of story.
Mm-hmm.
Until the curveball enters the picture, which is she's a survivor of the deadliest private school shooting in American history. And that one of the other fellow survivors claims that she was involved in it somehow. Which she contends is not true.
Okay.
So that kind of our setup. She's sort of trying to organize a wedding, try and contain her mother, who is portrayed as kind of, for want of a better term, white trash, who is kind of stands out like a sore thumb amongst the rich, white, waspy Harrisons. At the same time, she's got this director trying to chase her down who's making a documentary about the school shooting, insistent that she come and talk on the record for the first time about her experience in the shooting. Okay. Throughout, as we start to learn more about her background at school and her involvement in the shooting and what happened, we get these flashbacks to her as a young child. She was a scholarship kid at this rich school, so she was already an outsider, and she was a bit chunky as a young kid, and her experiences, as sort of a semi outcast at this very, very toughy school. The film's kind of a story of a game of two halves. The first half is full of every trope and cliche and lazy film move you can think of, flashbacks and her imagining things that aren't really there, all kind of trying to sort of build this impression of someone who was traumatized without ever really quite telling us that that's what it was. So, for example, the opening scene is her and Luke in a very fancy department store putting together their wedding registry. Right. They send you around with a little scanner thing. Can you scan different things that people can buy for you as a wedding present? And they're examining expensive carving knives. And one moment she's got the store person explaining what these knives are and what they can do. And then the moment she has a sort of I don't know what you call it, a flashback or something, where all of a sudden she imagines the knives are now covered in blood and she stabbed her fiance to death. And this is in the first 5 minutes of a film. And you're like, is she unhinged? Is she schizophrenic? Is this what you're trying to tell me? No, we're not. But this kind of little flashbacks or imaginations or what do you want to call them happen throughout the first half of the film without a great deal of explanation about what the fuck's going on. She talks about how she feels like a wind-up toy where you turn her key and she tells you exactly what you want to hear. And you're kind of like, this is kind of interesting. But you know what the first half really made me think of? And it reminded me of a film you do not want to be reminded of. It reminded me of American Psycho 2, starring, of course, Mila Kunis and the great William Shatner. Because she played a sort of a random serial killer girl in that film, like somehow inspired by Patrick Bateman. If you haven't seen it, it is fucking wild. That movie is terrible. And I'm by no means am I saying this film is as bad as American Psycho, but there were just sort of unexplained moments that kind of seemed in there for shock value to sort of grab you and pull you into the story, but it was more confusing for me and kind of like, what are you exactly doing? Why is she imagining these knives covered in blood? I mean, I I guess he's supposed to go, why have the knives covered in blood? I've got to watch the rest of this film to find out.
Yeah.
For me, it was a bit like the tits in the first 5 minutes rule of any horror film. If there are tits in the first 5 minutes, it's going to suck. And it's a universal law.
Yep.
And so something like that seems like a really lazy way of trying to drag me into the film because your script's not very good. Now, all this said, the second half is where things start to really get interesting, where she actually agrees to actually be part of the documentary. And we start to get some actual flashbacks of substance about what actually happened in the lead up to the school shooting, her experiences with her fellow students at this toffee private school, and what actually took place during the shooting and her role in it. At the same time, being juxtaposed with the fact she's now going to be on camera face to face with one of the survivor of a school shooting who says she was involved in it, and who has a significantly more sinister role in the lead up in her life in the lead up to the shooting. And it really, I was like going, okay, this is starting to get very interesting here. It all came down how it stuck the landing, and it stuck the landing pretty good. There's actually a scene of incredible intensity between Mila Kunis and Alex Barone, who plays the character of Dean Barton, who was shot in the school shooting and is now spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair. And it's kind of become inspiration porn. You know, he's written books and, given addresses to Congress and become a gun control lobbyist and that sort of thing. Yet we know from Arnie's flashbacks that he is not exactly what he says he is. And the scene between them in a quiet corner of a bookshop is some of the better acting I think Mila Kunis has done in her entire career.
I was going to ask, how is she in this? Because she was it girl for a brief period, and then she did Black Swan, and then got caught up with Ashton Kutcher, and not really done anything of particular substance except Jupiter Ascending. Woo!
I was going to say it's kind of been downhill since that was a big film for her, but maybe it was that flop thing. I was saying the same thing. Like she was a big star there for 5 minutes, and then Jupiter Ascending happened, and it kind of where she's decided to take a step back and just enjoy the money because she's still got that Family Guy money coming in.
Yeah,
and I believe Ashton's a very successful entrepreneur these days. So maybe I often wonder, why does Mark Zuckerberg still work? Like, what have you got to prove, mate? Like,
he wants to get that one lucky coin of yours.
It's got to be the power. It's got to be the power, right? Like the power to turn elections. But like when you've got that much money, and I don't know that she's got squeens of dollars, but I suspect they're pretty well off. Like, why would you keep working that hard? I mean, but she still does things, just not very high profile things.
Yeah.
But you're right. She was an it girl for 5 minutes, but you don't see her much anymore. This is probably pushing her to the extent of her abilities.
Okay.
I don't think she's a very good actor. I think she's a competent actor. And she's an attractive woman. And probably actually maybe a better voice actor than she is an actual, like she's done Meg for so many years.
Yeah.
She's a talented voice actor. She's okay. In the hands of a better writer, a better director, with a better star, this could have really been something pretty special. But they don't have any of those things. They have Mike Barker, Mila Kunis, and the author of a book. And Lord knows, you generally, as a rule, don't give the author of a book the screenplay to write. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. Gillian Flynn wrote the book of Gone Girl, and she wrote the screenplay of Gone Girl. So, maybe occasionally you can get away with it. But in this case, for Netflix film, it's pretty good. It's pretty good, and it's quite affecting the second half. So if you're like me and you're getting halfway through going, this feels like a TV show, or a really lame episode of Sex and the City. Stick it out, and try and put aside all the cliches that they keep throwing in, even through the second half, or all those sort of cliches where she's driving back through her hometown and she flashes back and she's driving past the church where the funeral happened for all her schoolmates, and she sees her young self getting out of a car on the side of a road outside the church as the older self drives by, and you're like, oh, it's such a tired trope. You know, have you got no creativity?
Yeah.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good for what it is. It's got a 6.4, 554 Metascore. It's probably better than that.
Okay.
You just got to get through the first hour or so.
Okay. All right. Interesting. For my final one, I was inspired by Miriam Margolyes. So I went to the movie of a spin-off of a TV show that I was a big fan of, the Phryne Fisher Murder Mysteries, starring Australia's one and only Essie Davies. And 2 years ago now, I think it was,
Crypt of Tears?
Yes, Crypt of Tears came out. And this is after freeing a young girl from her unjust imprisonment in Jerusalem, Phryne Fisher begins to unravel a mystery concerning priceless emeralds, ancient curses, and the truth behind the suspicious disappearance of Shirin's forgotten tribe. This is absolutely 100% same mold as the TV show, which, for lack of a better descriptor, is the Roaring Twenties Australia, with the delightfulness of the pomp and circumstance of something like a Hercule Poirot, with the local beat cop kind of feel of something like Heartbeat for the UK viewers. Mixed together with very liberal, juicy amounts of kind of sexual appetite for Essie Davis. She's a very attractive woman, as she always wears these sort of fine silks and satins that just kiss her skin like moonlight on a witch's pagan tribute, something like that. But there's also the romance of the will they, won't they, with one Nathan Page, who plays D.I. Jack Robinson. Miriam Margolyes plays Aunt Prudence. If you've watched the show, you're going to love this movie because they basically kind of like what they ended up doing with Sense8. They're sort of like, okay, we've got enough of a following that we could do a final film. And it seems to have become something of a popular thing, with Community now coming out with finally having a movie announced officially and things like that. This is just more of what you already want. But for new people, there is nothing here whatsoever.
Do I need to have watched a TV show to get this? Because I've never watched
it. They do put some effort in to try and make it open to people who haven't watched the TV show. But there's too much relationship between her and Jack, for one thing, and it's just, it feels like the ribbon on the series kind of bow kind of thing. It's like, okay, yep, you have to watch 4 seasons worth of TV to actually be able to enjoy this. You can't just walk into this without knowing anything. You could. You're not going to get much out of it. There's a lot of in-jokes to it, a lot of references back to stuff that happened in season 1, season 2, 3, and 4. So you have to do your homework for this one. Production-wise, considering it is effectively a TV movie, but just with a slightly bigger budget, does a really good job. They did a really good job in the TV show. Minimal set design, still using live locations in parts of Melbourne, because it is set in Melbourne, for some of the beautiful old townhouses and things like that. It's really lovely. And it's kind of refreshing to see this period of time not in England or France or America. So it's nice to see what the Roaring Twenties was like in Australia. And it's quite interesting just seeing how different the societal hierarchy played with each other in Australia, according to the Franny Fisher murder mysteries, compared to England or America or France, where there were much harder lines between interactions between one and the other. The character of Franny Fisher is delightful because she is a cyclone of modernization in a world stuck in the past. She is a woman that will happily wear trousers because it's more comfortable. I know. She is liberally open about having sexual partners that are not boyfriends or partners. They are there because she wants to have sex. She relishes in that. She is a proponent for abortion and the rights of women's rights and liberation. So it's very, very modern friendly in that regard for social justices. But as a film, it's not gonna. This is not going to draw anyone into the Franny Fisher series. It's just not. There's just too much to do. It'd be like, I don't know, like going into just watching Marvel Avengers Endgame.
Probably worse. It'd probably be like watching, Love and Thunder. So it's not even good.
Yeah. It's like, okay. Whew, sure. All right, let's go. So I'm not going to recommend it, but if you're a fan of the show, you will like it. If you have no idea what it's about, or those detective stories, which are all so similar, you're not going to get anything out of this.
Have you seen any of the Jack Irish films? Because they're very similar, but they star Guy Pearce instead.
I've heard that they're okay. I like Guy Pearce as an actor, so it's like I'd be happy to give them a try. But at the same time, it's like, no, I already feel like I've watched them.
I saw one once at MIFF, and I thought it was pretty good.
Okay.
And I've never gone back to watch them again because it's like it's the same as you say. But detective stories, you've seen them a million times.
Yeah. So in spite of the quality of performances, set design, anything that's going for it, it's like, I know this story. It would be like having someone just go, you know what? I'm going to do something really fresh. I am going to do a modernization of Romeo and Juliet.
Ah, that's never been done.
Nope, never been done. Not once. Nope, never. Nope. Or Hamlet.
Maybe with some like modern music in there or something, just to make it really hit.
What if we, just brought in guns instead of like swords and stuff?
That's crazy. It's crazy talk. You're talking crazy talk.
I know. I went too far.
Too far, man. You've changed. You used to be about the music.
Yeah, no one's ever said that about me.
No. I had a couple more to round out the show, and hopefully people are still sticking around. A real left field one that came via suggestion of somebody who lives in this house who shall remain nameless.
It was one of the cats.
One of the cats, indeed. And it is the 2017 comedy, The Female Brain. Now, I had never even heard of this. I believe it's on. I can't remember which streaming service I watched it on. It might have been Binge, I think, or I can't even think which one it was. Anyway, it was on one of them. Anyway, it is available legally in this country. What makes a woman swipe right for Mr. Wrong? Sofia Vergara and Whitney Cummings star in this fresh, witty look at the science behind. Stan, there you go. This fresh, witty look at the science behind our romantic missteps. So it's a rom-com. Mm-hmm. It's trying to do something a little bit different here in a sense, but I believe it's based on a book by Luann Brizendine, who I don't know if Luann is a scientist or just an author, but the idea behind the book that this was based on was the science of attraction, the science of decision-making around our romantic lives. And the film will have a scene between a couple having a conversation about something, and then it will sort of freeze frame and sort of zoom in. Did you ever play Zombie Sniper?
Yeah.
You know how like when you shoot someone in the head, it'll like bullets, and it'll actually zoom into the brain as the bullet. It's like that, except there's no bullets here. It'll just like, oh, in this scene, you know, like, well, he's doing this because his amygdala is creating cortisol, and that's causing him to do blah to make this decision to do this. It'll actually try and almost play out a scene between the couple, and then explore the science of why the scene played out the way it did.
Okay.
That seems to be the opening premise of the film. It doesn't really stick to that for very long. It's almost like a gimmick to say, hey, we're a romantic comedy who's doing something a little bit different. But, you know, for example, you know, couples who've been together for longer than 2 years, your brain no longer produces dopamine at that point in time. It starts to produce a different chemical, which I can't remember off the top of my head. And the other person in the house who did circulate this film would be now shouting at me, oxytocin. Oxytocin is the one I'm looking for. And oxytocin reacts in the brain differently. So whereas, you know, dopamine sort of produces that sort of natural high, where oxytocin doesn't make you feel that natural high anymore. It now starts to, the couple is now producing oxytocin. So now that breeds a closeness rather than a passion.
Okay.
That's the kind of thing it's trying to explore. It doesn't quite get it right, though.
Okay.
It has some interesting ideas at its core, but it doesn't quite pull them off. Now, names in this stars Whitney Cummings, who apparently is a successful stand-up comedian who I've never heard of. Toby Kebbell, who I think you're a bit of a fan of.
I'm a fan of Toby, yep.
You'd know Toby. He was Victor Von Doom in the movie.
I'm sorry. What was that?
Yeah, first of all, it was that movie. You know, that guy in it from that other year.
He played the opposing ape in the Planet of the Apes series.
The Apes. He was in Warcraft. So he's had some big roles.
Sofia Vergara.
Sofia Vergara. We have James Marsden, he of Cyclops, one of my least favorite actors in the world, James Marsden.
He is the kind of one of the poster boys for Lance Everyman.
Pretty much. He's like, do you need a handsome white guy? And we've got the actor for you. He can fit so much handsome white guy in this bad boy.
Wait a minute. Hey, James, I've got a new movie for you. Does it have an animated anthropomorphic character in it? No, then I'm not interested.
Other names in here, Beanie Feldstein, who has one of the best names in Hollywood. Beanie, notable for a couple of reasons. I think she's related to Jonah Hill, if I'm not mistaken. And she might be his sister, don't quote me. But she also played Monica Lewinsky in American Crime Story, which I talked about extensively earlier in the year. Right. She's actually a really great actor. Cecily Strong, probably just known for Saturday Night Live, also appeared in a 2016 ghost hunting film, but apparently it was a reboot of an old movie from the 80s, but no one has ever heard of it. She's pretty good in this.
That got whatever.
And a bit of a cameo from the great Jane Seymour. So what this film does, it sort of follows a series of different couples, about 3 different couples, and a university researcher and her assistant who are running experiments, which normally are tracking the same thing that the book this film is based on is about. So, you know, the chemical, decision making, if you will, the science behind romantic decision making, behind empathy and such. And Whitney Cummings plays Julia, who is nominally the scientist running the experiments. Beanie Feldstein is her assistant. I guess the center of the film is the fact that she has at some point had her heart broken, and she's like, "No, I've evolved beyond romance. I understand how romance works in the brain, so I have retooled my brain so I don't need romance in my life anymore." It's a fairly, the whole idea of, the broken woman at the start of the film. You don't need no man anymore, or the guy says, I'm past romance. I'm not doing it anymore. And she meets Toby Kebbell's Kevin, who comes in to be part of the study. And it turns out he acts like a giant douchebag to her, and she finds that attractive. So around this, we have also a couple played by Lisa and Stephen, played by Sophia Viraja and Dion Cole. We have Cecily Strong's Zoe and her basketball star husband, Greg, played by Blake Griffin. And then we have Lexi, and played by Lucy Punch, and Adam, played by James Marsden, who are another couple. And the weird thing is, I guess it's insinuated that these three couples have at some point been involved in Julia's study.
Okay.
But they never meet Julia. We never see them being involved in the study. The film just tells stories about them. We sort of check in with them every so often.
Okay.
Lexi is constantly trying to fix Adam, so by having him straighten his hair, etc., and picking at him to, get that thing checked out on your back, kind of thing. So she's constantly, trying to. She thinks the way to prove she loves someone is to try and help them, to make them better, to change them. We have Sophia, Lisa, and Stephen are a couple who've been together for like 10 years and trying to find a spark to reinvigorate that marriage. And we follow them through their misadventures and hijinks in trying to do that. Whereas Zoe and Greg have a different type of relationship again, in the sense that she's married to a very rich and successful basketball player. At the same time, she's trying to launch her own career without having to lean too hard on him and his money, and sort of remain independent and prove herself and her worth without that he's just doing everything for her. These are all moderately interesting stories and reasonably well played by the actors involved, but there's too many of them, and they didn't go anywhere, and they didn't really resolve necessarily. So initially we spend a fair bit of time with Lisa and Stephen, and we kind of vaguely get a resolution about, we kind of know what happens to Trina, but we don't actually get told, oh, this is exactly what happened, and this is, you get some sort of nice conclusion to their story. Lexi and Adam take up a lot of the second part of the film and their story, and they get a reasonably nice resolution to their story. But Greg and Zoe just sort of peters out and goes nowhere. So there's lots of ideas floating around here. And from a rom-com perspective, they're not awful. It just needed to be tightened up a lot with a much, much, much better script. The script here was written by Whitney Cummings and Neil Brennan. Again, as I said, Whitney Cummings is a stand-up comedian. She also directed this film.
So this must have been like a labor of love project for her then.
Maybe it was. Maybe she had naked pictures of somebody. This is her first and to date only feature direction. Nothing else has she ever directed.
This kind of sounds like the sort of thing like, remember that movie that He's Just Not That Into You?
Yes. Like an ensemble cast.
Yeah.
I think that was also a very successful book.
Yeah, that's right.
Before this, she had only written TV shows mainly. Like she wrote Two Broke Girls, which says a lot because that show's awful. So it had a chance to do something interesting with a rom-com here. It just needed a better director and a better writer to start with. This cast were fine for the most part. Probably if you're going to have a lead actor like the character of Julia, you probably also want a better actor than Whitney Cummings in that role, because she's not a writer, she's not a director, and she's not much of an actor. So I kind of think if you had a really talented writer and director involved, or a better writer and director, and a really good star, Sandra Bullock, for example, likable, convincing, charismatic. I think this could have been a more successful film. I also think the title sucks. The Female Brain. We've talked at length for the amount of times people roll up to the multiplex, and that's where they make their decision about the movie they're going to see. I just don't think The Female Brain is the kind of title that's going to get people into a cinema.
It sounds like the sequel title to Frank T.J. Mackey's book.
Indeed. I mean, if you want to put off, half your audience, this is a great way to go about it. And you know what? It's not a bad film. It's got some good stuff in there. and it was kind of at best I could say about it was inoffensive.
Mm.
So look, if you really like some of the people involved, if you enjoy Whitney Cummings stand-up, that might be more your speed. But I think if you're going to check it out, set your expectations to low. The science stuff was interesting, I'll give it that, but just needed to kind of stick to it a little bit more. And as I said, a better writer, better director, better star. Apart from all that, it was great.
I'm sensing a theme for all of the stuff we've watched this week.
Well, I mean, yeah, it is cheaply made. You know, and I can't imagine it's had a particularly big budget. And it shows.
Yeah.
It's a shame. Some wasted ideas. I have one more to finish up tonight, and you'll be free to enjoy your evenings without listening to us anymore. This is a very different one from the last couple we've talked about. So last night we watched the 1992 Mexican literary classic turned into a film, Like Water for Chocolate.
Now I've heard of this one, but I don't know.
And I have heard of it as well. And I'm going to now going to attempt the original title, Como Agua para Chocolate. I don't know if chocolate is how you pronounce it in Spanish, but hey, anyway, I don't speak Spanish. And when tradition prevents her from marrying the man she loves, a young woman discovers she has a unique talent for cooking. This is based on a novel by Laura Esquivel, who I think wrote the screenplay here as well, for the coincidence. I am told that this is, part of Mexican literary canon, in the sense that, like, if you want to understand, if you go out and study Mexican literature, and there probably are people who do that, who aren't Mexican, this is one of the books you read. If you want to understand Mexican literature, this is one of the ones you read. So this is almost, Catcher in the Rye, or Tom Sawyer for Mexico, but probably a little bit more sophisticated than So it's an important novel for Mexico. It made me thinking, what's an important novel about Australia? And I kind of came up short, other than obviously The Magic Pudding. That's a real book if you haven't read it. So the idea behind this story, we follow the character of Tita, played by Lumi Cavazos. By the way, there's nobody in this film you would have heard of. It is a Mexican film. And her sisters. Tita is the youngest of the three sisters. And they are brought up in a very strict traditional Mexican household. And it is a tradition in that household that the youngest daughter is not allowed to marry. She's instead to look after her mother until her mother dies for the rest of her life.
Great life.
Yeah, cool story. Her mother is played by, I think, Regina. Actually, I'm pro for names. You're not going to know any of these people. Her mother is played by this very austere actor who plays it brilliantly, and he's very austere and strict with her. Early on in her life, she attracts the attention of Pedro. Pedro Musquiz, played by Marco Leonardi, who has a color picture on IMDb, so I guess that means he had a career of sorts. He was in Once Upon a Time in Mexico, and he falls deeply in love with her and expresses her love for her at a very young age, and tries vehemently, and doggedly to try and convince her mother to grant her Tita's hand in marriage. She says no. No, she's not. That tradition's against that. So instead, he actually chooses to marry Tita's sister, Rosora, merely to be able to stay close to Tita. So it's sort of, his tactic. Tita's still not very happy about that, as you might understand. And in the process of this, she learns that she has this, I don't know if she ever really consciously realizes it, but it turns out she has this ability to imbue the food she cooks with her own emotions. So she basically becomes a glorified servant in her role as the youngest daughter. So she ends up doing a lot of her family's cooking with the character Nacha, who's sort of a maid or, a nanny kind of character at the start of the film, teaches her to cook. And for example, she cooks the wedding cake for Roselle, her sister's wedding, which is kind of a dick move, right? Hey, your sister's marrying the man you love. Would you mind making them a cake? There's a lot of those moments in this film.
Yes, sure. Always put a little bit of yourself into everything you do.
So the cake ends up being imbued with her grief and sorrow. And when everyone at the wedding eats it, they all start crying.
Okay.
Later on, she makes a quail with and this quail dish she makes using with a rose petal flavored sauce. And the rose she uses to make the sauce was given to her by Pedro.
Mm-hmm.
And so this dish is imbued with this incredible passion that she feels for Pedro. So people who eat it all end up sort of, skiving off to go shag each other and stuff like that, to the point where her sister eats it, goes outside to take a very naked shower. Sorry, all showers are naked. That's stupid. But a very erotic looking shower, only to find that it's so erotic, it lights the fucking shower cubicle, her wooden shower room, on fire, and causes her to run naked across the countryside and join the revolutionaries. As you do. I know I've done that twice this year.
What, the naked shower?
If you haven't run across the countryside naked to join a revolution, have you really lived?
Deleted scenes from Forrest Gump right there.
The Forrest Gump Billionese Liberation Army.
This sounds like I'm getting kind of vibes of Amelie.
Yeah, that's probably not too dissimilar from it. What I believe this literary tradition is called, which it comes from the book, I'm assuming it's quite faithful to the book, is called magical realism.
Okay.
And it has been explained to me that magical realism is a Latin American literary tradition where, due to political repression, you can't talk about what you really want to talk about. So you talk about something else. So something fantastical that isn't, hey, the government's a piece of shit. But you use this fantastical story, which is basically an allegory for the government's a piece of shit, if that makes sense. If you think of something like Animal Farm, used allegory to tell a story about the evils of totalitarianism and particularly, Russian communism. That probably isn't magical realism, but something like that, if that makes sense, if you're kind of following. This is not just a podcast about film. You're getting a lesson in literature now, people. But that's kind of what you've got to think of. This is kind of, I think, the tradition where these kind of crazy things happen. It continues to, continues to come from. It's sort of, as they continue to happen for these sort of wacky things, like the shower block catching fire and everybody of the wedding vomiting because the cake was so full of sorrow and such. This film is difficult to watch in parts though, because I think it does assume a level of knowledge about Mexican literature and Mexican culture and Mexican history. So it's not going to really explain who these revolutionaries are or what they stand for or what the revolution's about. And maybe I should know about that the various...
We are the People's Front of Judea.
Fuck off. I should know more about Mexican revolutionaries, but I just don't. So, I don't, her sister does turn up later as a general, in the actual revolution. After jumping onto a horse naked with one of the revolutionaries. How else do you get a job as a general? I ask you, because I don't know. It does have a telenovela feel to it, in since the film is shot in very soft focus a lot of the time, in that kind of way that a lot of soap operas are shot.
Yeah.
And their dialogue is incredibly flowery. I never can find any of the quotes here for you, but like, only the pots in this room, know your sorrow. and that sort of thing. And is a great conversation with an American doctor who is who ends up wanting to marry Tita, about inside each person. There's here we go. My grandmother Morningstar was a Kickapoo Indian. She said we are all born with a matchbox inside of us, and we can't light them ourselves. We need, like in this experiment, oxygen in a candle. But in our case, the oxygen must come from the breath of a lover. The light of a candle can be anything: a song, a word, a caress, a sound, just anything. Something that pulls the trigger and lights one of the matches. Each of us has to discover what our triggers to life are, because the combustion of one of the matches feeds the soul. If there is no trigger for the matches, the matchbox gets damp and will never be able to light any of them. There are many ways in which we can dry a damp matchbox. Rest assured, it can be solved. It's also very important to light the matches one by one. If an intense emotion were to light them all at once, they would create such a brilliant light that before our eyes a tunnel would appear, magnificent, showing us the way we forgot we were born, calling us back to find our lost divine origin. That's one, monologue from one character, and
wow,
while it's kind of awesome, it is very flowery.
Yeah.
But again, I feel like this speaks to the language in which the book was written, and the country in which the book was written, and the culture it was written in, as opposed to something that wouldn't fly. Something like that in a Hollywood film, I don't think anyone can deliver that with a straight face. So this is a difficult one to recommend because, I had the help of Michelle, who knows a little about the book and obviously a little about some of the culture in that part of the world, to give me a heads up on part of what was going on. But at the same time, it was also difficult to follow. The ending was utterly confusing. I got no fucking idea. The film sort of jumps 20 years into the future, and you've kind of got to put the pieces together to go, oh, so she never married that guy. He married her, but she's dead now, so that means he can marry her. And that guy, his daughter, is marrying his son. And okay. It took me 5 minutes to put all the pieces together, and I'm like, maybe I'm an idiot. And well, actually, there's not much doubt about that. But I really struggled to figure out what the fuck was going on. And then the end is so melodramatic. So it's a very melodramatic, very flowery, Mexican melodrama, but with some beautifully written dialogue. As I said, very flowery. It does show its age. It's 30 years old now, and it looks older. The guy who plays Pedro, his blow wave, should have been nominated for an Academy Award because it did a lot of work in this film. It's a bit much, honestly, if you're not really if you're a really big fan of the book. In fact, I'd probably recommend finding a copy of the book if you're interested in that kind of literature from that part of the world. Apparently, Robert Rodriguez spent some time on the set because he was shooting his first film, El Mariachi, in the same town at the same time, which is a nice little link. It's I'm struggling to say I recommend it, but it was an interesting film. I'm glad I watched it. It's available for free in Australia on SBS On Demand if you're keen.
Cool.
But hey, look, it's good to expand your horizons a little bit and try things from different countries. And, we know a lot of great talent comes out of Mexico in terms of filmmakers. So I'm glad I gave it a go.
Cool. Interesting. So always interesting to kind of just find those kinds of movies and just...
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I just noticed the guy who directed this film, Alfonso Arau, probably best known for playing El Guapo in The Three Amigos.
What?
Yes. Wow. Okay, that's El Guapo. I love that film.
That's Harley.
Would you say I have a plethora? You would have a plethora. We need to find an excuse to watch that movie. It's probably racist now.
We don't need an excuse, and yes, it is racist.
But you were saying it was interesting sometimes to pick up stuff from around the world that you wouldn't normally see.
Yeah, you can just suddenly find something that's like, okay, that's not what I was expecting. I was looking at the tags that IMDb used to describe it, and it is just drama, romance, and that is something that you don't get much of, especially from Western cinema. It's usually when romance is involved, there's more than an element of comedy, because as what sounds like with this movie, it can end up being very, very flowery and kind of over the top for most people. Just too much, too saccharine sweet. So that drama, that romance, there's always that brevity to it. And it usually ends up being enough to qualify as, oh, it's a rom-com. But no, I mean, what was the last romance movie you can think of?
Not many. They don't make many of them anymore.
Exactly.
One thing I'd say this film did pull off, it was not saccharine sweet. There was some darkness to this story.
Okay.
And not your traditional kind of, okay, 3 acts, meet cute, romance grows, tragedy, resurrection. It's I mentioned her cooking ability. She kills multiple people inadvertently because she's imbuing her emotions into this food and then feeding it to people. And she does kill her sister amongst other people in this manner. So it's by no means is this saccharine sweet. In case I gave you that impression, it's just a bit weird.
I clicked on the romance tag of IMDb just to see what came up. And top 50 romance movies and TV shows on IMDb currently right now: House of the Dragon, Blonde, which I'm surprised neither of us have got around to watching, but I do want to watch that.
Super Mario Brothers movie.
Yeah. Romance?
Thor: Love and Thunder.
The Empress, Grey's Anatomy,
Big Bang Theory.
Yeah.
Okay, so, it's a very broad term.
Yeah, it is. It really, really is. And just going off of what we were talking about before, for Australian literature, Picnic at Hanging Rock, and housemate Shay, she would probably mention The Power of One. She loved the movie of that one as well. And The True History of the Kelly Gang.
Interesting, there were moments in like Water for Chocolate that reminded me of Picnic at Hanging Rock, at least in the way it looked and felt.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think magical realism really describes what they were doing in Picnic at Hanging Rock, but there were some mystical, magical, fantastical elements to that story as well.
Okay.
Apparently Barbie's a romance as well, so it's number 50. So it hasn't even been bloody released yet. It's in the list.
People are already loving it.
I'm looking forward to it, but yeah, I don't know if I could. Yeah.
I think it's going to be so weird. I just think it's going to be weird. But, I don't know what to expect.
I hope so.
But that brings us to the end of this show, ladies and gentlemen. A nice round 2 hours and 6 minutes. That is absolutely a perfect round number. Thank you so much for joining us this week. We talked about our chain movie of the week, Magnolia. I have picked the 1999 superhero comedy movie Mystery Men, available on most streaming platforms for rent or purchase in Australia as well as the rest of the world. Next week, I'll talk about the finale for The Rings of Power. We talked about Luck, Miss Fisher and the Crypt of Tears, Emily the Criminal, The Female Brain, Luckiest Girl on Earth or Alive or whatever they want to call it, and Like Water for Chocolate. Quite a packed show for you.
Show. Not bad for 4 days since the last show.
Yeah, not bad at all. Now, I would also like to make a little bit of a plea for ladies and gentlemen. You can go over to facebook.com/George Tarrant and find me and sponsor me, because I am trying to walk 280 kilometers, I think it is, over the course of this month for Black Dog Institute, which is mental health awareness. I did it a couple of years ago, and I am trying to raise $1,200. So please go over. You will find links on my Facebook page where you can donate as much or as little as you like, but anything that you can donate would be very, very helpful. It's something that I am I care a lot about mental health awareness. and it is a great cause. It's great charity, and it's always fun to see me walking around going, walk too much, legs hurt. It's just entertaining for everyone, frankly.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. It's a great cause. And while we are talking about causes, buy his book.
That one's a hopeless cause. Cause, Travis.
Buy his book. It's available on Amazon.
And Amazon, if you are listening, why not? Give us a free book by George Terran. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again, and we will see you this time next week. Good night.
Good night.